One gang has become synonymous with Birmingham in the 1900s. But were they really the smartly dressed, ruthless family we've all seen on screen? Or was the truth much more dangerous? This is the story of the real Peaky Blinders. In 2013, an award-winning television series would burst onto our screens. But what was the real-life inspiration? Who were the real Peaky Blinders? And who was the real Tommy Shelby?
Birmingham in the 1860s through to the 70s was in the process of rapid and spectacular change. Its population was exploding. It was approaching over 400,000 by 1871. We made anything that the world wanted. It was buttons, it was guns, it was jewellery, it was brassware, it was pens. Tell us what you wanted, we can make it.
Birmingham at the turn of the century is really a city of two halves. On the one hand, it's doing really well in relation to the other major industrial cities of the Midlands and the North. However, that wealth comes at the expense of the people who labour for it, the working class. And their lives are extremely different.
There was hundreds, thousands of people flooding to the area for work, for better prospects, to improve their lot for themselves and their families. There was lots of deprivation, people coming in for quite poorly paid manual labour jobs and really struggling to make ends meet.
The living conditions for the poor were horrendous. Thousands of hard-working families crowded into back-to-back houses. 3, maybe 4 families to one house, sharing one communal toilet outside.
They were entombed almost in this cycle of poverty. It was a battle every day against King Poverty, and that king was relentless and he was uncaring.
They are expected to labour for the prosperity of the British Empire until eventually they die.
There are some aspects of human nature that don't seem to change from one age to the next. When people are given no opportunity, no outlet, no escape from their situation, you will only ever get one result: violence.
Fighting was almost a leisure activity for some men. They're living in poverty. They own nothing. They are looked down upon. They're disparaged. But the one thing that they've got is their fighting prowess. So in a poorer street, those men that were regarded as tough gained status. It was something that they had.
Under these circumstances, it's pretty clear that violence wasn't just a means of survival. It was a way of expressing the frustrations and discontent with their lives.
They're called sloggers from 1872 because they slog. And they are the worst gangs for violence and the most notorious gangs in Birmingham from late 1860s really to the turn of the 20th century.
When you think about crime at that time, if we just try and make sense of it with some compassion, some of that crime would have been in many ways perceived to be out of necessity. So if you don't have any food and you want to keep your family alive, you're going to steal food for them. So I think, again, compassion for where some of that early criminal behaviour comes from.
It was a very violent time, and you can see lots of records and evidence of different weapons that would be used, and they would use anything they could get their hands on. So generally steel toe cap boots, belt buckles, any bits of brick or stones or anything they find on the floor. Lots of evidence of assaults where objects and missiles have just been thrown at the other person.
Their main weapon is their belts. They wrap the belt round the wrist. They grab hold and make sure they've got it caught in the palm of the hand, and then they buckle it, leaving about 8 inches, and then they slash, cause terrible injuries. They are not organised criminals, these are all hooligans.
If you've got to work 6 days a week from morning till night for pennies, and with no way out, violence is a language. Just the only way to be heard. But where do the Peaky Blinders fit into all this? Who were they?
The term Peaky Blinder is a fashion statement. The Peaky Blinders are often called the bell-bottom crew. They wear bell-bottom trousers tight to the knee and then wide, 22 inches wide. And they have something like this scarf called a daff, a silkish type scarf. They're wearing a billycock. They have prison cropped hair, really almost bald. But they're like a quiff. They like to show it off. So they steam the billycock and they make the brim into like a funnel and they pull it over one eye. Hence the brim's blinding the eye. And when the flat cap comes in, all they do, they just pull the cap over the eye to blind it. So they've got a distinct fashion. And the first time that the term Peaky Blinder is used in the press in Birmingham is March 1890.
The mythology surrounding the Peaky Blinders is that they kept razor blades in their caps and that they used these as lethal weapons when required.
I don't believe any gangster ever had a razor blade in their cap because it would be mentioned in the newspapers. I found no authoritative evidence that there were ever razor blades in caps.
An inoffensive chap called George Eastwood goes into the bar of the Rainbow Pub on the corner of High Street, Bawdsley and Adderley Street, not far from the Bull Ring. He's a teetotaler. Sadly, he's picked the wrong night. He's drinking a ginger beer. And 3 hard men with an evil reputation come in. And they insult him for drinking a soft drink. And a chap called Thomas Mucklow, the captain of the gang, says, "What you drinking that tack for?" He says, "Mind your own business. I can drink what I want." And a 14-year-old lad was a witness, and he said they shouted, "Give it to him hot, lads." Oh, poor George, they did give it to him hot. So, after the attack on George Eastwood, the next day there was an article in the newspaper reporting on it saying it was by the Peaky Blinder gang.
During the 1880s, you get the rise of the sensationalist press, the kind of modern tabloid press. And the way in which the media reports on crime is completely different at this point. They have these sensational headlines that are extremely eye-catching. The media is a really important part of the creation of a new criminal stereotype at the end of the 19th century.
So looking through the original newspaper articles at the time, it would appear that there isn't one specific gang called the Peaky Blinders. Even judges start to refer to poor criminals as being of the Peaky class. Any criminal involved in theft, gambling, assaults, attacking police officers, they're all just called Peaky Blinders. And among the Peaky class criminals, some of the very worst were the Sheldon brothers. Stephen Knight, the creator of the television series, has said that the spark for the Shelbys was the Sheldons.
The Sheldons had 5 brothers. 2 of them were respectable. 3 became 3 of the worst criminals and violent men in late Victorian and Edwardian Birmingham. John was the oldest. By 1881, when he was 15, he'd already got convictions, and throughout the 1880s and 90s, he's a professional thief. He's not a man to be messed with. He, on one occasion, with a friend, is coming out of a pub, and they've taken a dislike to an Irish bloke, an old man, and they batter him in the street. He lives opposite with his daughter, the Irish bloke. His daughter comes over to try and stop them, pleading with them, please leave my father alone. Oh no, they don't stop. Sheldon grabs hold of the poor young woman by the hair, throws her to the ground. They drag her along the street, kicking her. That's the kind of man he was. The next oldest brother was Samuel, only 5'1.25". Despite his small size, he's a nasty, vicious man, and he's scarred with the results of his fights on his arms, on his legs, on his hands. He's another man that you don't mess with. Like his brother, he has no respect for women. He's one of a group of men that burst into the house of a 16-year-old young woman. They smash the door down. She flees upstairs, and then in court it said they all committed a most disgusting assault upon her. Joseph is the youngest brother. In 1899, he's named as a member of the feared Bar Street gang, and it's pretty certain that his two older brothers were in that gang. He's also given as a Peaky blinder.
So it appears what we have is this rapid rise in street violence, with people like the Sheldons at the forefront. That perception being fueled, of course, by what we could call early tabloid journalists, fanning the flames of middle-class panic.
In 1899, the gang problem was so bad in Birmingham that the chief constable resigned, and the Birmingham Watch Committee, the counters that ran the police, fetched over from Ireland Charles Horton Rafter. Rafter realised, as soon as he come in, the Birmingham police was badly undermanned. So he worked on a rapid recruitment campaign. Rafter insisted, though, that his recruits had to be tall, they had to be fit. That meant that these young, fit officers could now go about in pairs in the toughest districts, where the reign of the ruffian was imposed by the Peaky Blinders. Before, many of these areas only had one policeman on a beat. Now there's two. They're big, strong lads. And the story that was passed on for generations in the Birmingham police was that Rafter asked three things of his recruits. Can you read? Can you write? Can you fight? Because they'd have to.
In 1914, the outbreak of the First World War drained Britain of a great many of its fighting-age men. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the crimes that had been associated with the Peaky class dropped. But we know that history never gives us any short answers. So what else contributed to this decrease in gang activity?
There's organic factors that are working together. There's a High Church of England vicar called Father Pinchard who starts a rudimentary boxing club, so they're learning respect, discipline. Football is becoming a really popular participation sport as well as a spectator sport. And instead of gathering on waste ground to play pitch and toss, they're playing football now. And just as the gangs are disappearing, the cinema comes in. And instead of joining a street gang, lads are going to the pictures 2 or 3 nights a week.
But of course, all the social programs in the world wouldn't be able to erase criminality completely. There were some who were already too embedded in a life of crime to ever step away. And there's one name that keeps coming up again and again in history books, police records, and arrest warrants, not just in Birmingham, but up and down the country. William Kimber, born 7th of February 1882. Born and raised in the tough Summer Lane area, notorious for his Peaky Blinders, it wouldn't be long before Kimber would have his first run-in with the law.
His mum was an Irish Brummie, his dad was English. There is no suggestion that either of them were ever involved in any crime. But Kimber, at the age of 12, is birched for a petty theft. Now, that means that he is forced to lie down and they pull down his trousers. Then they take a bunch of robust birch twigs, wired at one end, and whip him. Again, I'm not excusing Billy Kimber's later criminality, but at an early age, the state is using violence against him.
It would be remiss to think that it hasn't had an impact, something that significant in terms of being punished in that way, possibly being shamed. Shame is something that we don't talk about when we look at these acts. We just look at the act itself, and we don't think about how vulnerable you are when you're in that position and the shame that comes with that. And I think these are all things that he used as fuel to get out and do anything he could to get out of that situation and never experience that again.
He obviously learned to fight early on. The only Brummie I ever met who knew him said, "Carl, he was strong as an ox and he fought like a lion." Then, with that reputation as the top man, the top fighter, he can control things.
When you really get down to it on the streets, right here, right now, where it matters, violence is everything. But the threat of violence, just in a moment, is even more powerful. That's why people are very happy to let their deeds to be known, no matter how gruesome, because this sends a message. It's like psychological warfare.
He came from a place where fear lived all the time. I imagine he lived in a state of fear. Am I going to get my next meal? Am I going to be beaten up? Are we going to be attacked as a family? So fear fueled this. He felt fear as a young person, and then he wanted to become the instigator of fear, because that's how you stayed safe.
His favourite punch was to the solar plexus. Once you hit somebody really hard in the stomach, it makes them soil themselves. Now, can you imagine that? Not only are you being beaten up, not only are you bent over in pain, but you have been humiliated.
He was very brutal, but the difference, with him was he just had a polish that showed so much more street smarts.
Billy Kimber was a fighting man, a feared fighting man, who, through his physicality, his fierceness, his viciousness, became the leader of a group of the most feared criminals in England at the time, the Birmingham Gang.
According to police reports, by 1918, Kimber has become the leader of several small gangs. But street fighting was no longer the name of the game. Kimber was after money, real money. And where was he going to find that?
Racing booms in the immediate aftermath of the First World War. Lots of men are coming home with payments from the Army, Navy. A lot want to drink and gamble, enjoy themselves. There's masses of people going to racecourses.
So all the money populated there, and of course all the people who wanted money populated there behind them.
And by the early 20th century, he's got a gang with his brothers Joe and Harry and other hard men who are going to the racecourses of the Midlands and the north of England. They're known as the Brummagem Boys. They pickpocket. And if you know you've been pickpocketed and try to stop them, what's going to happen to you? They're going to duff you up badly. Because there's hardly any racecourse security, and the few policemen there are scared. These gangs also blackmail bookmakers. You want to stand on that pitch? That's a good pitch, you've got to give us a fiver. You've got a stall you're standing on, 2 and 6pence, that's 12.5 pence a race. 6 races, that's 15 shillings, 75 pence. That's as much as a poor man could earn in a week. You've got a blackboard, you write on the blackboard the names of the horses. What do you need for that? A stick of chalk. 2 and a tanner, 2 and 6pence a race. At Epsom, Doncaster, the big meetings, there could be hundreds of bookmakers. This is big income.
Billy Kimber and his gang made at least £400 a day, which translates to £22,000 a day, about 8 million a year in today's money.
Now, Billy Kimber and the Birmingham Gang were running the racecourse rackets in the Midlands and the North. No challenges in the Midlands and the North. Up towards Newcastle, they've got their own gang, and they don't bother with Scotland because the Glaswegian gangs run the racecourses up there.
So it's no longer just fighting each other over territory, but actually the organisation of criminal rackets around betting, gambling, liquor licences. So they're a really distinctive new period of organised crime in the city.
So, in a short space of time, Kimber's influence had become widespread. This gang, known as the Birmingham Gang, are terrorising racecourses up and down the country with no regards for the consequences. Could this man be the real Tommy Shelby? By the beginning of the 1920s, almost all of Britain's racecourses are under the control of one man, Billy Kimber.
The Birmingham Gang and their London allies are extorting money from the bookmakers, but they're racist, they're anti-Semitic.
He would target Jewish bookmakers in the East End.
One of whom is a man called Alfie Solomon. Now, compared to Kimber and most other members of the gangs who deserted in the First World War, Solomon served with honour. He received 3 service medals, and he comes out and he becomes a bookmaker. He's a secular Jewish man. His dad's got a green grocery business in Covent Garden. They had a servant growing up, but he's bookmaking.
One event will change the course of Alfie Solomon's life like no other.
And a really vile man called Tommy Armstrong, slugger, member of the Birmingham Gang, comes past, and he's offering 11 to 4 on a horse. And Armstrong says, I'll have 12 quid on that, on the nod. That meant he wanted it on credit. If it loses, is he going to pay up? Of course he's not. But if it wins, does he want paying? Of course he does. Solomon says, no, I ain't taking the bet. I'm not having that. Anyway, it kicked off. The horse won. Armstrong's mucky drunk by now. He comes back, demands his money. Solomon refuses. Armstrong took his field glasses, his heavy viewing glasses, smashed them into the face of Alfie Solomon. He collapsed on the floor in a bloody mess, and then Armstrong slammed him in his face with his boots. Solomon's left there, prone. His face a bloody mass and with several teeth missing. This attack on Alfie Solomon transforms him. I've got no evidence at all before the attack that he was a vicious criminal, but afterwards he certainly becomes one.
Alfie Solomon seems to suddenly become violent out of absolutely nowhere. That shows to me underlying rage, and it needed to be unlocked. Someone doesn't just become violent one day out of absolutely nowhere for no reason. I mean, he had a reason, he was beaten up, but that's not a reason to start a criminal career. So I think that unlocked a rage in him that he had for a very, very long time.
Alfie Solomon was just another link in the chain. There are different groups. So you have the money earners, and you have the people who need to enforce that, the enforcers. They'll go out and they'll do the street work, and they'll break arms, and they'll kill people, and they'll dominate people, and they'll collect the money. But really, that's all they're good for. But the bosses, the real organised crime figures that do very well at this and rise up, they can do both.
Billy Kimber had gone from a backstreet thug, a petty criminal, to one of the first organised crime bosses in England.
I think some of the crimes that we see Billy Kimber engage in are narcissistically driven. I think he became a little bit addictive to what he was getting, and it felt really, really good, and he felt he deserved more because of that. And I think that drove him to then want to go to London and kind of pursue crime there as well.
Kimber and his boys had been raking in money, working the country's racecourses like their own personal gold mine. But one thing we know about organised crime is that when money's flowing, you better watch your back. March 1921, and London bookmaker Alfie Solomon has just been severely beaten by Billy Kimber's lieutenant, Tommy Armstrong.
Alfie Solomon then turns to the governor of the Jewish East End underworld, Edward Emanuel.
He was king of the underworld with the Jewish people of the time in the East End. He was really cunning. He knew how to put things together.
Like Kimber, he's a fearsome fighter, a thug, a man who people are scared of. On one occasion, he has a fight, he gets shot. Even though he's shot, he chases the bloke down the street and batters him. But he's also, like Kimber, got something up here. He's got a brain.
Edward Emmanuel is a very clever figure. He's very, very good at what he does, because he's one of them people who understands to keep in the background is where the real power is. And he was very good at moving guys around, which is another real trait of an organised crime boss.
In my opinion, Edward Emmanuel is England's first godfather. He wants to get rid of Kimber and his London allies from down south, but he's got a team of Anglo-Jewish tearaways, but on their own they're not strong enough. Things move very rapidly after Solomon turns to Edward Emmanuel for help. Emmanuel turns to an up-and-coming young gangster. His mum is English. His dad was Italian but came to England as a youngster from Parma in northern Italy.
The Sabini gang were quite interesting. They was vicious thugs. There was about 300 members of the Sabini gang at its prime. Where they settled was in Clerkenwell in Little Italy, of course, just the other side of the East End of London. He started off as a bouncer, really. That was his first kind of innings into that world. He was a very rough and tumble, very, in-your-face street brawler.
And they're called in to back up Alfie Solomon and Emmanuel's Anglo-Jewish tearaways against Billy Kimber's Birmingham gang and their London mates.
And so began the biggest gang war this country had ever known.
So the Birmingham gang and their London allies realise Sabini's been called in. They corner him at Greenford Trotting Track. They're shouting, we're going to murder him. They've got wood, planks of wood, they're hitting him. Somebody says, get a gun, shoot him. Luckily, he's saved by the police. It turns out that the gun wasn't registered. He should have really been prosecuted for it, but he got away with it. Throughout the spring and summer of 1921, there are shootings, beatings at racecourses and in London and around railway stations in the capital. It really was dangerous. Things are getting out of hand. This isn't good for business. The newspapers are picking up on this. Racecourse ruffians, roughs of the turf, all these kind of phrases are being used. There's too much attention from the police.
It's interesting, isn't it? The press attention only really gets going once there's a spectacle. When ordinary bookmakers were getting extorted, no one really paid attention.
So, someone calls a meeting. It's going to be at Collier Street, the house in King's Cross where Sabini is now living. They decide that they'll have to make peace for the sake of their businesses. Billy Kimber turns up with some of the McDonald's. They're having a good drink and he's going to leave. Who turns up but Alfie Solomon? Now they're racist, they hate Jewish men and women, and Kimber goes for him, pulls a revolver and he calls him racist names. There's a scuffle, and in the scuffle, as Alfie Solomon's trying to stop Kimber from shooting him, the gun goes off and the bullet actually goes into Kimber's back. Everybody disperses. Kimber's found unconscious on the street outside. He's sent to hospital. Allies of Kimber told me that that night members of the London gang supporting Kimber and the Birmingham gang surrounded the hospital. It tells you the power that Kimber had. They go to court. Solomon admits that he accidentally shot Kimber. Billy Kimber is a witness who refuses to testify, and all he says is this: if he says he shot me, well, that's up to him, but only cowards use revolvers, and I would rather blow my brains out than use a shooter. The case is dismissed.
But the worst was yet to come. What do we actually know about Billy Kimber? We know that Billy Kimber and the Birmingham gang are determined to maintain their dominance down south. But Edward Emanuel and Darby Sabine have other ideas.
Epsom, probably the biggest meeting of the year. The Birmingham gang decide they're going to really show who's in charge.
The Epsom Derby, one of the biggest racing events of the year, was attended by over 200,000 people. But get this, they had no security. This is a gift for Billy Kimber.
Birmingham gang members are going down there terrorising bookmakers. After racing, some Leeds bookmakers are leaving when they get attacked by 20 odd really vicious, horrible men from Birmingham. They had been paying protection to Kimber before, but it looks like they're moving towards Sabine and to Solomon. The Birmingham gang really inflict terrible injuries on them, and then they decide to go for a drink in a pub, which is where they're eventually arrested. Out of the 20 odd, 17 men are sent down. These 17 men belong to different little crews within the Birmingham gang. That weakens Kimber. He's lost 17 of his most feared fighters. He then decides he's going to make a massive show of strength at Bath in the summer. The railway station at Bath suddenly is surrounded by a horde of Birmingham hard men, many of them not part of the Birmingham gang, but are attracted to Bath by the opportunity of having a pop, having a go at the Londoners, and particularly the Jewish Londoners. Kimber's there. His main fighters who are not in prison now are there. They start beating up Jewish bookmakers, and Kimber and another horrible Birmingham gang member batter Alfie Solomon, who goes down. They also attack his clerk, an inoffensive bloke called Charles Build. They hit him with everything, and then somebody smashes him with a sandbag. The poor bloke goes down, and eventually when the police come to save him, he's unconscious, covered in blood.
Billy Kimber gets charged for that assault. But in September 1921, when it goes to court, no one shows up to give evidence against him. So the case is dismissed. But before they leave, Kimber's lawyer announces to the court, "Don't worry, there'll be no more of this trouble, because this has all been sorted out."
Cleverly, Edward Emanuel starts the Bookmakers Protection Association to stop the ruffianism on the turf, to stop the blackmailing of bookmakers. Well, what then happens is the jockey club like this, they're really upset by all the bad newspaper reports. People are going to stop coming racing if they don't watch it. So they back this new organisation, which appears to be legitimate. The police then are quite happy because they can say, yes, this is a legitimate organisation. But what does he do? He employs Darby Sabine and his men as stewards to enforce order.
But this was a very clever strategic move to protect the Jewish bookmakers that were constantly being threatened and attacked and preyed upon by, of course, Billy Kimber. This also legitimised Darby Sabine and everything that they needed to do next, including protecting all their organisation.
Essentially, the Sabines are untouchable because the jockey club in control of flat racing and the police like the idea of an official organisation which they can support.
Emanuel has won. The Birmingham boys have been outwitted. They can't operate down south anymore. So, the boys insist that no southern bookmakers can operate in the Midlands or the North ever again. He says here, a meeting is finally called at Beresford's house to discuss terms of a truce. By September, newspapers are reporting that the gangs have divided England between them, that the Sabines would have the south of England, and that the Birmingham gang would have the Midlands and the North.
This means that till the mid-1920s, the Sabines rule supreme on southern England's racecourses and those in London.
But that was the time for Billy Kimber to walk away.
What's fascinating about Billy Kimber the Birmingham gang, is that as soon as he steps away, the whole organisation disintegrates. They're all fighting each other again, just like the slogging gangs. Without him at the centre, it all just falls apart.
Now, Emmanuel, he's moving slowly away from gangsterism into legitimacy. And he sees an opportunity to start up a legitimate printing company, which will print all the printing needs of the racecourse bookmakers, their tickets. Instead of the chalk, runners, racing lists. He's clever enough to step back, pull the strings of the Sabinis, make money, but start up a legitimate printing company, the Portsea Printing Press. Now, down south, the Jockey Club have decided they've got to take action. They bring in a new force of security men, and the Sabinis are gradually pushed out. But what they do, they regroup in Soho. They take over the protection rackets of the illegal drinking clubs and the Spielers. They also extorted protection money from restaurant owners, publicans, not only in Soho, but in their heartlands of King's Cross and Clerkenwell. Albert Dimes and Burt Marsh, leading towards Jack Spott and Billy Hill. He dies a broken man in 1950. Alfie Solomon was targeted by other gangs into the mid-1930s, and unable to get police protection, he then disappeared. Kimber, so it's said, about 1926, shoots through the windows of the Griffin, one of the Sabini's hangouts, and flees to America, where it's said he kills a man, and then he goes off to Chicago. Well, who's running Chicago in 26? Al Capone.
Billy Kimber had a real depth of a person, and you see this all the way through his journey, from the street smart to the brutality to the real CEO managerial decisions that he made, even back then, which of course positioned him as one of the leading lights of organised crime in the UK.
Kimber comes back. By now, he's married to Elizabeth Garnham, the sister of one of his pals from Chapel Market. And he was then clever enough to realise when he was beaten that he needed to go legitimate. I think he was pushed into that as well by his wife, who, like Sabini's wife, wanted middle-class respectability for their children.
Kimber would eventually settle in Devon, in Torquay, in a house overlooking the bay. He too would reinvent himself as a legitimate racecourse bookmaker. An advert he took out with the local paper would read, "Bet with Bill Kimber, a man who's reliable."
And there's a real irony here, because he becomes a leading member of the local Devon Bookmakers Protection Association, the very organisation that in effect brought him down. Started by Kimber's nemesis, Edward Emmanuel, as a means for him to take over down south, but the BPA, by the 30s, has become a legitimate and respectable organisation.
We know that eventually Billy did retire, but prior to that, psychologically, he was on guard his whole life, right from living in the slums in Birmingham and throughout his entire kind of criminal career. I think what that does to a person is it sets them in this constant sense of fight or flight, which means that your adrenal system is activated, which means that you can never really rest. And I think that that is only sustainable for so long in terms of a person's lifespan. I don't think it's something that you can do forever.
Kimber eventually dies in 1945 in a nursing home. And he died one of the last of the real Peaky Blinders. If we look at how Derby Sabini, Alfie Solomon, Billy Kimber are portrayed in the series, there is a fundamental difference. Derby Sabini is depicted as a bella figura, like a Sicilian mafia don, elegantly dressed with a walking cane. He wasn't. He didn't wear fancy clothes. He wasn't elegant. He wasn't a bella figura. He wore a flat cap, a collarless shirt, working man's clothes. He didn't speak Italian. He regarded himself as an Englishman. Alfie Solomon is portrayed as an Orthodox Jewish man. He wasn't. He was from a secular Jewish background, whose family had been settled in England for generations. Billy Kimber is given as a Londoner, a small Londoner. He wasn't. He was a Brummie.
I think people like the romanticism, the glamour of it all, and this suggestion of a different society in Birmingham that people might not have otherwise been aware of.
I think people will always be drawn to Gangsters because in many ways they feel like the stuff of myth, partly because these men that we see, and it's usually men, sometimes women, but usually men, are very good at creating stories. They're very good at creating legacy. And human beings, we like stories. They create a mystery. And I think we're drawn to understanding that.
What lessons should we take from the real Peaky Blinders and the gangs of the 1920s?
Most importantly, gang members and organised gangsters are not meant to be admired.
These were not glamorous anti-heroes who people would look to for support. They weren't Robin Hood characters that looked after the poor. They preyed upon the poor.
They were feared members of the working class. They didn't look after the poor, the Peaky Blinders. They beat them up. They bullied them. Sabini, Kimber, Emmanuel took money from poorer people whenever they could.
I suppose it's not really surprising that a fictional portrayal of a criminal organisation doesn't match with the reality. After all, it's the job of historical fiction to impart glamour to the everyday, to make it exciting. But what's fascinating isn't so much that a brilliant television series found a devoted audience, it's how little attitudes have changed. We're still convinced that criminality is largely a working class phenomenon. And street gangs, they're not a thing of the past. They exist today in every city in the world. But why? Perhaps there is something innate in people that makes them want to seek out fellowship, community, and where none exists, construct their own. But I suppose that's why we need the legends, for when reality is not to our taste, legends don't often leave room for ordinary folk.
I remember the sickness was forever. I remember snuff videos, cold Septembers, the distances we covered, the fist fights on the beach.